Empire. The flight of the baseball has data on top of data.
We threw multiple pitches with a pneumatic cannon that we got from Washington State University. We threw multiple pitches across the room with the same velocity, spin rate, and spin axis, but we altered the seam orientation, and we got the ball to move differently.
That's John Garrett, analytics engineer at Rapsodo, where modern pitchers are armed with a whole new set of data points to perfect their craft. This is the Future Sport Podcast. I'm Bram Weinstein. America's pastime has been flooded with analytical information for years, maybe like no other sport on earth. It started with roster building and Moneyball tactics and morphed into launch angles, shifts, which are illegal now in the majors, and spin rates. And yet the quest to learn more and perfect throwing and hitting a ball continues. Our guest this week is John Garrett. He's an analytics engineer at Rapsodo, which just launched a new hitting and pitching device, Pro 3.0, that is going to be the first software that will allow a computation of seam orientation and seam shifted wake break. We'll make him explain what that is in the new world of analytics in big time baseball. Hi, John. How are you?
Doing well. How about you?
I'm doing good. Before I get started, I just want to ask you, since you guys are knee deep in data analytics, what do you make of the changes in Major League Baseball with a pitch clock and no shifts and all the things that are happening in the sport right now?
Yeah, I am a fan of all of the changes, actually. So Rapsodo is based out of St. Louis, so I watch a lot of Cardinals games since they're just right in our backyard. And I went to opening day, and you saw a lot of hits landing that wouldn't normally land, and that makes the game more exciting, I think, with increased offense. And I mean, we've seen that stolen bases are up, and the success rate for stolen bases is up. It's all very exciting. I agree with MLB's kind of rationale that it's not less baseball, it's the same amount of baseball, just with less dead time, and I'm all in favor of that as well.
And you guys follow obviously all these analytics and pitching motion and all of that type of stuff. And now that it's sped up, do you believe there are any unintended consequences for pitchers that are going out there and being forced to speed up what they've done their entire lives?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And just a few weeks back, I was at the Sabre Analytics Conference in Phoenix, Arizona. And they brought that up in a panel on the rule changes there. And there were a number of former players, former pitchers that were on that panel. And, their kind of outlook was, we'll see. I mean, there's definitely a possibility for that. But also, pitchers are elite athletes and they're going to adjust. So I think, like I say, we'll see, but I wouldn't anticipate that would be all too common.
Okay. Let's get into the data then. Why don't you remind our listeners, what does Rapsodo do?
Yeah, so Rapsodo's bread and butter is in ball tracking. So we have a number of golf products now. We just came out with the MLM2 Pro. And then we have baseball and softball products. So primarily we've been in the practice product area, so helping pitchers and hitters as they work on their craft and develop new pitches, work on their swing, all of that. We are just now venturing into the stadium world as well, so live in-game ball tracking data. So all about helping pitchers and hitters be the best players they can be. Okay.
So tell us about some of the new technology and what you're learning about performance.
Yeah. So the Pro 3.0 is our newest practice product that's on the market. And what's really, really cool about the Pro 3.0 is that it does both hitting and pitching all in one unit. Whereas before we had the pitching 2.0 and the hitting 2.0, each device only did pitching or only did hitting. So the Pro 3.0 has 3 cameras and 2 radars. So we're seeing all of the ball flights other than about 4 feet while it goes over the top of the unit. And this allows us to get increased accuracy on strike zone position, on break numbers. The increased images also allow us to get the seam orientation data that we just announced and came out with, as well as seam shifted wake break, which is coming very soon.
Okay, could you define those? What is seam orientation?
I'll start with kind of a bad definition and then get into a better definition. So kind of a bad definition would be how the seams are oriented in the air as the ball's flying through to the plate. That's a bad definition, right? Because I included both seam and oriented in the definition for seam orientation. But what we know about the ball as it's flying through the plate is that it's spinning always, except for knuckleballs where it's not supposed to spin. And so the orientation is always changing, but it is constant with respect to the spin axis. And so our seam orientation metric is showing where that spin axis is located on the surface of the ball. So in other words, the point on the ball that the ball rotates counterclockwise about.
This episode is brought to you by Chalk and Dog, which brings together the vast experience and expertise of 2 of the brightest agencies in media, sports, wagering, and gaming. With deep roots in the UK and the US, the agency offers expert guidance in everything from market entry to market expansion for startups as well as established global brands, powered by best-in-class communication and creative experts. Chalk and Dog has vast international experience and delivers results-oriented, tailor-made solutions for B2B and B2C organizations. Having that information tells you what?
Yeah, so this is important because how the seams are oriented is going to influence break in the way of introducing that seam shifted wake effect. So seam shifted wake effect is something that I studied as an undergraduate and graduate student at Utah State University for about 3 years before I came to Rapsodo. And so essentially what we have here is where the seams are positioned relative to the flight of the ball. You can create an asymmetric wake that creates an asymmetric pressure distribution, which results in a force acting on the ball to push it in a direction that it otherwise wouldn't move. And so seam shifted wake effect can lead to additional movement and in particular unexpected movement for the hitter. And so with the Pro 3.0, since we're seeing the whole ball flight now and we're seeing how the ball is spinning, we're able to separate out how the ball should have moved based on how it was spinning and how the ball actually moved, which takes into account seam shifted wake as well.
And then you can then go back to the pitcher and explain what with this, their grip, their throwing motion, their arm angle, that's what created this movement.
Yeah, so I mean, as far as pitch movement goes, there's a lot of things that go into it. You mentioned arm angles, velocity, spin rate, the spin axis, but with seam orientation, this is saying if you orient the ball differently using the same spin axis, velocity, spin rate, all of that, you can get the ball to move differently. So that's what we found at Utah State, actually. Early on in our research, we used the Rapsodo 1.0, which just did pitching at the time. And the way that the 1.0 worked was that it would, it's all camera based. So it sees how the ball is spinning through the air. And then it would interpret how the ball must have moved as a result. This was based on what we knew about the aerodynamics of baseballs at the time. And so their model took into account drag and magnetic force and gravity. And our research showed that that wasn't enough because we threw multiple pitches with a pneumatic cannon that we got from Washington State University. We threw multiple pitches across the room with the same velocity, spin rate, and spin axis, but we altered the seam orientation, and we got the ball to move differently, just purely based on changing the seam orientation.
Okay. What is seam shifted wake break?
Yeah, so seam shifted wake break is the difference between how the ball actually moved and how the ball should have moved based on how it was spinning. And that's because how the ball is spinning results in the Magnus effect, which creates lift on the ball, a lift force on the ball. And up until, the last few years, when Utah State was coming out with this seam shifted wake research, that's all we knew about what creates break on a baseball was how the ball is spinning. And so there's been many models that have been built out to show how the ball should move based on how it's spinning. But our research showed that the seams also have an effect on ball flight that those models didn't account for. And so the difference between how the ball should move based on how it's spinning and how the ball actually moves, we can equate that to the seam shifted wake break. And there's possibly other things going on here that result in that difference, but seam shifted wake is one that we know for sure is happening, and that's because we did our tests at Utah State University in our lab indoors where there was no wind or anything, and we were able to create that difference in break based on how the seams were oriented. And so seam shifted wake break, like I say, is the difference between how the ball actually moved and how the ball, in theory, should have moved based on how it was spinning.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. What do you not know about the flight of a baseball now that you actually want to know?
So our research at Utah State University, we did a 2D particle image velocimetry study. So this is showing how the air is flowing around the baseball in one plane. And so we were able to learn a lot about ball flight by seeing how it moves about the ball in that plane, and by adjusting how the ball was positioned, we were able to see how the seams kind of all around the ball would potentially affect that flow around the ball. But what we were not able to see is how all of that works together at the same time. And so I think something that we've talked about with my professor Barton Smith at Utah State is that it would be really cool to do a 3D particle image velocimetry study, which is able to show the whole volume of air flowing around the baseball and see how it all works together all at the same time. More talking about specifically the physics of what's going on, right? Because we see at the macro level that what the result is. The result is the ball moves differently than it should have based on how it's spinning. But I think our understanding of the physics behind what's going on at the micro level has improved a lot, but there's still a lot that we could learn there.
Okay, so let me go back then to the beginning of our conversation, which is, and I mean this tongue in cheek, you guys seem like the enemy of bringing all of this offense back into baseball at an expedient rate.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I think seam shifted wake really are all tools to help pitchers improve, and something that me and Dr. Smith have always said is that it is a way to help pitchers who don't have elite spin rates still get elite movement. And so it is an unfair advantage, we could say, for pitchers, all about, making their pitches less hittable, less predictable for the hitters.
John Garrett is an analytics engineer at Rapsodo. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
On the next Future Sport podcast, the modern golf course is infused with technology.
And we know that there are customers that would prefer to use their electronic tee sheet and point of sale system, and that's okay overall. But they would still like to sell tee times in our market. So it's important for us to have an integration to T-Snap to make sure that somebody who chooses their technology over ours still has the opportunity to sell tee times inside of our marketplace.
That's Jeremy Hainline, Vice President at NBC Sports Next and Golf Now, where access and amenities are improving. That will do it for this episode. As always, the future is now. This is the Future Sport Podcast. I'm Bram Weinstein.